Entering the atmosphere in T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Omega Metroid podcast from OmegaMetroid.com. My name is Andy Spiteri, joined by Doominal Crossing. Doom, how the heck are you? How is your, as we record right now, your April 20th?
My April 20th? Well, I haven't smoked any funny substances today. I'm actually really not much of a smoker, but I always respect the homies that do celebrate and whatnot. So if you're celebrating 420, I hope you're having the best 420 ever. I took a couple of weeks off Shadow Labyrinth, and last night I finally jumped back in. And again, I thought I was approaching the end of the game, but no, this game just keeps getting expanding more and more. There's more. I'm finding more and more huge areas and whatnot. So I don't know. I don't know how far deep this rabbit hole goes, but I'm eager to finish this game finally, because I've been at this now for a couple of months now, ever since I revisited it. But overall, my thoughts really haven't changed. It's a solid Metroidvania, and one that I hope we get the opportunity to talk about someday.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny you say, and actually, I was teeing up the date of April 20th because I will be celebrating this day by playing a game that turns 20 years old today, that we just did a full podcast on the ZeldaCast about. We do a lot of shows on Omega about inspired by Metroid, but not a lot of shows on the ZeldaCast about inspired by Zelda games, and we are honoring the arguably one of the granddaddies of them all and celebrating Okami, which has turned 20 years old. So I just finished my playthrough, and I think I'm gonna go back in and maybe go for the hundo. I don't think I've ever got the 100% in Okami before, but I'm feeling motivated this time around. So I think I might go and try and find all the stray beads and all of the other secrets that the world has to offer. So shout out to the team at Capcom and Okami for turning 20 today. A very niche game. Won a lot of Game of the Year awards in 2006, even over Twilight Princess, Final Fantasy 12, some heavy hitters back then. So certainly worth checking out if you have never played it. Can I assume that you're not an Okami veteran, Doom?
I'm not. So I own the game. I own the HD version, at least, both on Xbox and on PC. It's on the eventually list. Granted, there's 300 games that are on that backlog, but yeah, I do intend to play Okami someday, because I've definitely been really interested in checking it out for sure. I've heard nothing but phenomenal things, and especially after the sequel got announced, I probably will at least try to play it sometime before that sequel comes out.
And it's a long game too, so I wouldn't necessarily say to people it's an easy play. It's going to take you 40 hours to really, I think, get from the start to the finish of the game. So if you're on the fence, go check out our episode that we just dropped over on the ZeldCast, just talking about Okami. And Doom, you know what? I have a couple other easy for me to say things to promote here. A couple shows to announce over on patreon.com/spnet, because we have recorded a whole slew of new shows, including the penultimate episode of Gooey Plays Metroid 2. So Goo has taken out, he's got all the Zetas, he's got all the Omegas. There is one Metroid left for him to get. Or is there? Could that change as we get into the depths of SR388? We'll have to wait and see, but it's been a really, really fun season so far. And next month, so in the month of May, the poll goes up for what game we are going to play next. Could we just run this sequentially and play Super Metroid? Are we going to pivot into something like a Metroid Prime 2? Maybe even Other M, I think, is going to be on there. And maybe we'll even throw Metroid Zero Mission on the poll as well to see a different interpretation of a game that Goo's already played. But lots of options are on the table, so go check that out. We also recorded, for all you Zelda fans out there, new episodes of the ZeldaCast. We have brand new episodes of Middle Earth, the podcast that were just recorded, including a 90-minute whopper that is coming out next month. This month, we're going to be talking about all of the latest news from the new movies, The Hunt for Gollum, the Stephen Colbert written Shadows of the Past. So lots and lots and lots of thoughts about that. And, Doom, here's the big one, the coup de grace, so to speak. It is the debut of the Stardew cast, featuring Allison Aletha and Samantha Spiteri. Episode 1 is coming out imminently, and I hope that everybody checks it out, because this is one of Sam's first podcast endeavors without me. So I'm really looking forward to listening to that. She's been playing a lot of Stardew Valley, and hey, $1 gets you in the door for this show, so never been a better time to check out patreon.com/spnet.
For a split second, I thought, oh my God, this madman is about to announce yet another podcast he's hosting. But no, then you said started, and I'm like, okay, there's no way Andy's hosting that one. But no, that sounds like a lot of fun. I'll definitely have to check that one out for sure. Get a podcast from a unique perspective. I always really enjoy kind of checking out podcasts that are a little bit outside my domain, and start a Stardew Valley podcast. That seems like a really fun one to dive into.
Yeah, like Stardew is not really my thing. Like all of those games, like Animal Crossing, Minecraft, those types of games, they're just like kind of not my thing, which is totally fine. I totally get why a lot of people love them and whatever. So it was cool to see like Sam kind of who like doesn't really play a lot of video games. Like she's played a few Metroid games, because I've asked her to, but that's kind of like about it. She played her Dr. Mario, and that was it. So it was fun to see her get, really into a different type of video game. So there we go. That's all over on patreon.com/spnet. We have a lot to get into here today, Doom, because for the first time in nearly a year, we are bringing back another fan favorite sub-series that we do here on the podcast, and we will be mapping Metroid. And it's been a long time since we've done this. I was actually like stunned how long of a time that it has actually been since we went and talked about an area and really analyzed it in depth. We are coming up on, not quite a year, but like not far off either. The last one we did was in mid-June, so it's definitely been a long time coming. So we are putting our caps back on today to go in, dive deep, talk about some granular details about one of my favorite areas in the entire Metroid series, Brinstar from Super Metroid, which we haven't really talked about Super Metroid a whole lot on the Mapping Metroid subseries yet. We did Wreck Ship, that was a couple years ago, and we've not gotten a chance to get back to Super Metroid. And this area, you were there, Doom. Like when we did the Great Metroid Area ranking, spoiler, this was a top 3 area for me. Like I really, really enjoy Brinstar. Like I think it's one of the most versatile, interesting areas that is in a Metroid game.
Yeah, I think in terms of like map design, I feel like Brinstar is like the gold standard template for like moving around and unlocking and chipping away at an area. Like it's just such a masterclass in game design. And again, that's just talking about like that raw gameplay. It doesn't take into account like the music, the art direction, the storytelling of the environment. Like this area really just has it all, and it really sets the stage for what to expect in the rest of the game.
And so let's just talk about the layout here to get us started as we start our Mapping Metroid here. And like the thing that always kind of takes me by surprise with Brinstar is like this area feels huge. Like even to me, like this area feels way bigger than Meridia, way bigger than Norfair, even though like you kind of look at the map grid, they're about the same size, give or take, which is really strange even more because Brinstar is like really, really a segmented area. Like you go here in a couple of different sprints, let's just say. And one of the really interesting things that I really like about Brinstar is how it is really kind of like divided into, I think like most people would say 3 areas, but I'll even say 4. really distinct like sub area within the area kind of idea here. So like obviously you have your, well actually when you start off going to Brinstar, let's call it NES Brinstar or Dark Brinstar, because you go down, it looks exactly like Brinstar in NES, and it's very dark, it's very desolate, and yeah, you're really only there for a cup of coffee, but you pay homage to the beginning of Metroid. It's the same room layout. You go to the left and you get your morph ball. You can find your energy tanks over on the other side, or your missile expansion, sorry, on the other side. And you go back to Criteria and you do a couple things and progress through the game. But you come back, and we got Green Brinstar, which is, of course, the colloquially referred to term for the portion of Brinstar with the foliage, the pink rooms, the Spore Spawn boss fight, and, of course, that awesome music that plays. You progress through there, and then you go to Red Brinstar, or Lower Brinstar, as it is also known, which is the portion where there's all of the poisonous, like, I don't know, like flowers that are sucking you in, lots of bugs. You're on the pathway to get towards Kraid's lair, and of course there is, albeit a smaller, but there is a newer version of Kraid's lair here, where the big guy himself is waiting for you. So it really does feel like each of these little areas has an identity, and particularly Green and Red Brinstar, like a lesser Metroid game would just have those as their own areas, but you just got one big Brinstar whopper here for Super Metroid's Brinstar. So I think just like the way that it's structured and laid out is just like really cool and really unique. And I'm not saying it's the only area that kind of has like portions of the area that just have distinct identities, but it's always one that's really stuck out for me. Obviously, this is my first Metroid game, so it's the most memorable. And I think that there's just some really, really cool sequences and rooms and just stuff. Like, it feels like Brinstar is just so densely packed with stuff that we'll get into here. But yeah, your initial thoughts, impressions of Brinstar Doom, what you like about it, maybe some of the way that it's structured, and then we'll talk about some specific rooms that we like.
Yeah, I actually really like that you brought up kind of like the different biomes that are kind of present in Brinstar, and how, you know, in most Metroid games, those would kind of be sectioned off as their own areas. But no, that's the exact same area in Super Metroid, and I think Super Metroid still to this day is like the best example of that in action, where, you know, because like typically when you think of a Metroid area, like, you know, you think of Fendrana Drifts, which was also in our top 3 for very good reason in the Great Metroid Area ranking. And you definitely have, you know, a couple of unique sections. You know, you have your main Fendrana section, and then you have, you know, the kind of Fendrana's Edge section when you're trying to get the gravity suit. But at the end of the day, they're both still, you know, very icy areas. Maybe the Space Pirate Lab is probably, you know, the one unique section of that area that kind of stands apart. But, you know, yeah, you really have like two kind of like distinctly separate areas. Whereas, you know, here you got Red and Green Brinstar, which alone are already like, you know, very different types of atmospheres. But then, like you mentioned, you do also have stuff like Kraid's Lair. You do also have, you know, the throwback to NES Brinstar as well. I would even throw in, you know, that connection tube to Meridia, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. I feel like that single room has its own unique vibe in and of itself. But yeah, there's just so much going on in this area, and every time you turn a corner, even in, and you even mentioned this, even in Green Brinstar, you do have like those pink flower petally rooms. So even like in that distinct section off area, there's like so much different types of art going on, and it never feels like the art is fighting each other. It all blends in and, you know, unites each other in such a wonderful way. And yeah, it always makes exploring the area so fun, because it feels like you could turn the corner and just see something completely new that you wouldn't even expect.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, like I feel like it's just like so packed with stuff for you to find. Like, there's a ton of expansions, but there's also just like a ton of other like cool little world building details, as we'll kind of talk about here as we get a little bit deeper into the episode itself. But I really, really love like just kind of getting lost in this area. It feels massive to me, and it's just maybe a little bit of nostalgia goggles on, but at the same time I kind of don't think so. It's just like a really well designed area that you go into that constantly feels like it's fresh and it's reinventing itself, depending on what corner of the area that you're actually in. Let's talk about some of our favorite rooms here, Doom, in this area, and because I think that there is like definitely a lot to choose from. I want to single out though a notorious room to start us off with, maybe the most notorious in the entire Metroid franchise, and that is, of course, the Noob Bridge. We can't talk about Brinstar without talking about the Noob Bridge. It has its own article on on Metroid Wiki, so you know it's a big deal. This is the room that kind of separates the pretenders from the contenders here. If you're going to play Super Metroid for the first time, the room where, of course, infamously you have to hold your dash to get across the all the pitfall blocks, and the game really doesn't do a good job. And in fact, I'll just say, like, it doesn't tell you at all that you even have this dash. So many people have no idea that they have this ability to dash before they actually get to this bridge. And the intention of this bridge is to teach you that, yes, you do indeed have a dash. But I've made it my kind of like life's mission here, Doom, to spread the good word of Metroid. And I always recommend people start off with Super Metroid because I think it's the best one. And I cannot tell you the amount of times that somebody's just like, I think my game is like borked, or I went and did something out of order because I cannot get past this bridge. And I'm like, aha, I know exactly where you are. Have you encountered that in any of your travels?
People personally asked me about it? No, but I've definitely hear people talking about it online. it's the infamous Noob Bridge. I mean, it has its own name for a reason. Legendary tales of players succumbing to pitfalls, and you know what? It does give you a little missile expansion when you inevitably fail that bridge on your first attempt. So that's very nice of it. But yeah, I feel like when I first played Super Metroid, and this was like way back in 2007, which I know feels weird to say 2007 was way back, but we're approaching 20 years as of next year. But yeah, there were definitely areas of Super Metroid that gave me some trouble. I don't remember the new bridge giving me trouble, but I also don't have the best memory, so I'm not comfortable with definitively putting myself on the pedestal of like, I didn't fall for the new bridge. And honestly, like,
I definitely did when I first played.
I have plenty of other embarrassing stories that could remedy even if I did. So there is that. There's also another important factor of the new bridge as well, and that is if you're playing a step above, it's also a crucial factor in a not so infamous, a quite famous speedrunning technique in Super Metroid called the Mockball as well.
Yeah, let's talk about that room, because I think that room is really important as well. So it's a little bit before, I guess like you can Mockball anywhere, but I think that most people would say like the primary spot that you're going to Mockball is right after you get off of the elevator all the way on the left side of Green Brinstar, and you step off, and there's that vertical hallway that has all of the pink doors, and to your left is the map station, and then to your right is the Mockball room. And this is where I think most people practice their Mockball, because it is really the room where you go, and like if you're right, if you fail, you do get a missile expansion. I think maybe you were thinking of that when you were saying the new bridge there. But if you if you pull off the Mockball, then you can actually skip a couple of the grates that come down, and you can get the early super missile, which allows you to skip Spore Spawn entirely in this section of Brinstar, which is a little bit of a shame actually, because I really like the Spore Spawn boss fight. But yeah, I think this is like a very important room. I have spent a ton of time in this room perfecting and learning how to do my Mockball, and it's like really one of the first like big set pieces in the game where this comes in handy for me anyways. So yeah, this is a room, it's not like a noteworthy room, but it's one that you certainly spend a lot of time in, and if you can get that Mockball, you've just sequence broke, and you did it in the Mockball room, which I am officially dubbing it.
I think that's fair. I mean, you know what? If Super Metroid isn't going to give us room names, I think it's fair game for us to improvise at this point forward. And I mean, you know, what else do you call it but the Mockball room? The M.
Yes.
We could also call it the MB. We could also call it the MB room, but maybe we shouldn't associate it with other M. I don't know.
You know what? I'm a little bit of an MB apologist. I will say. All right, let's talk about another. You know what? Technically speaking, by letter of the law, this room is in Meridia. However, I think that we definitely need to talk about this room, which basically exists in Brinstar, and of course, it is the infamous glass tube room. So the room that, I think we take this just like so much for granted now, you know. But like I remember I first played Super Metroid in I don't know, 1999 or something like that. And I was like, where in God's name do I go? And I think I got tipped off by like the early internet, like GameFAQs.com. They were like, if you see glass, you should try and do something to it. And so I'm in this room, and like, you know, you're looking at it, and I'm kind of like, I feel like I should be able to break this somehow, but I just didn't know how. And when I finally like power bombed this glass tube and it shattered, that was such an awesome moment. And from there, like, that does bleed into Meridia, but like, you still have the Red Brinstar music playing. It's clearly like a segue from Red Brinstar to Kraid's Lair. This room was so great, and you felt so smart, or at least I did, knowing or finally figuring out that I needed to lay a power bomb in order to break the glass tube and progress further into the game.
Yeah, it's one of the I can't, and again, this is one because I beat Super Metroid without a guide when I first played it, and I can't remember how I figured it out. And it's funny because going back now, if you actually stay on the title screen and you look at like the little demo sequences, there's one of the demo sequences actually shows Samus power bombing the tube. So like
I know.
So like we all could have seen how that plays out, but like I never did that, and I can't remember exactly how I figured it out, but I was just kind of like, yeah, there's something about that room, and it's funny because it doesn't echo a lot of the other level design in Super Metroid, where typically you'll have like one of the blocks might look a little bit different slightly than some of the other blocks, or something about the room's positioning will tell you to like, hey, you should probably like start bombing or shooting that area to kind of see if there's a secret behind there. But yeah, the tube, the tube doesn't really do that. There's no like panels that look different, and we'll see with tubes in future games where maybe it's damaged, or in the Prime games where you can scan it. But there isn't really anything indicating that the tube is breakable. But there's just something about the way the camera is static, the way it just like focuses on that piece of architecture that just like, I don't know what it is specifically, but it just like implants this idea into you that it's like there's something beyond here, I feel like. And eventually, I just tried to power bomb, and then it worked, and that just, yeah, like a lot of other Super Metroid players, it kind of just blew my mind from that point forward. And that was just that point where it's like, oh, there's so much more to this game that I didn't even know existed beyond this point. This just opened a world of possibilities now. And yeah, that tube is just, I mean, I would go even further than Super Metroid. That's just an iconic Metroid moment in general. Now.
Oh,
I think,
totally.
Again, with it being referenced in, pretty much every 2D Metroid going forward, and even, a couple of the 3D games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. Like, that's, it's a great moment in the Metroid series, and one that has endured, really. Like, I get excited now when I see a glass tube in a new Metroid game, because I'm like, aha, one of my favorite things to do now is to just go and bomb like glass tubes, and it makes me think of my first times kind of playing Super Metroid. So yeah, I think that is a great moment. I have a few more rooms that I want to show. Like, I could probably go and shout out almost every room, but there's a few more that I do want to get to. I think that the whole like sequence of rooms, particularly the hallway like right before Kraid's Lair, is awesome. Like, that to me is like such a great like retelling, reinterpretation of the Kraid's Lair like NES hallways, and it just like I think it looks so great. Like Super Metroid does this a lot. Like a lot of its rooms are like really upscaled, nice versions of the NES rooms. This one I think like always looks really cool, just like the green tiles and all the spikes and all that kind of stuff. I've always had a really big soft spot for that. And you know what? We should also shout out another classic room in this game as well, which like again, this doesn't have an official name, but we all know it. It's the room that you may accidentally speed boost and fall into on your way into like the big pink room. And of course you fall down a tunnel, or you fall down a shaft, and you are met with the Etecoon. And so that is your introduction to your first little friend. The Etecoon then teaches you how to shine spark if you are, able to pick up on that. And you just kind of learn this like really critical skill almost by like happenstance. Like it almost feels like it was unintended, and I appreciate it because you have to be like, you kind of have to be paying attention and pick up on the environmental cues that the Etecoon is trying to teach you when you are down there, because otherwise you're just like, how the heck do I get out of here? And there's a conveniently placed energy refill as well for if you need to practice your shine sparking. So it's a kind of a win-win.
Yeah, it's also great, and then the Dachoras as well. I believe you power bomb that kind of giant shaft in Green Brinstar as well, and that's how you discover how to wall jump as well. So you encounter both of the animals in different locations on Brinstar. Mm-hmm. And actually, speaking of which, it was actually funny before you started talking about New Bridge and you were talking about infamous rooms. Of course, the first thing that I was thinking of was the good old energy tank reprised from Ridley's Lair, where you have a set of invisible tiles, and you need to know exactly where to jump, and if you don't, you're gonna fall right through and miss your prize. That's the first thing that I think of when infamous Metroid rooms are always brought up.
I was gonna bring that up later when we talked about expansions, but yeah, that is a diabolical one, right from Ridley's Lair, and I think we've all fell for that before playing Nestroid, and probably all fell for it playing Super Metroid as well. And again, this is just a really good showcase of like, this is going to teach you how to wall jump and singularly wall jump as well. So I adore all of the rooms where all of the animals live and teach you how to do things. I think it's really cool. I want to go kind of off cusp here and talk about a room that I think is a really spectacular but underrated room, and it's one that you don't get access to right away. It is the room right before you get the X-ray scope, and it has kind of the bugs that provide light, and with every bug that you kill, it gets darker and darker. It's a simple room, and there's spikes at the bottom, and arguably it's done even better in Lower Norfair, but like, I always thought that this room was just like really cool. I thought that it was like really awesome, and again, like kind of giving you like a, let's call it an optional upgrade. I guess like it is optional for you. It's an optional upgrade, and it's one that just like helps you progress through the game. But I think that the room, like actually getting there is really memorable and really cool. So wanted to shout out that room as well. I have like a couple more I could go through, but Doom, any that are sticking out to you as just like favorites?
That's a great pick. I actually did want to shout that one out later, so I'm glad you brought that one up. You do have the room before in Brinstar, and I can't remember what you get from it. It might just be like a missile expansion, but there's another room where you encounter those bugs that are lighting up the room. But I feel like this one is done a lot better, and especially because there's also hazards in the way as well, and so you kind of have to pick and choose, like, hey, am I going to destroy these creatures that are blocking my jump, or do I want to actually see where I'm landing? And it's a really cool risk versus reward. Mm-hmm. So very cool room there. My next pick isn't necessarily like a room itself, but more so a sequence, and that is and this is like one of my favorite parts of Super Metroid, but it's returning to Crateria for the first time since you descend into Brinstar. That whole sequence where you collect the power bombs, and technically you're supposed to go back into Norfair first to grab the grapple beam, but if you're playing for the first time, you're probably going to keep going up right after you collect power bombs, and just progressing up the rooms back up to Crateria where you first started. Like, that is always just such an incredible sequence, and especially the first time when I realized that I basically had just went in like this giant elaborate circle and kind of reemerged at the starting point with like, at a much higher power level than I was previously, with like, this newfound, sense of like exploration and, determinism. Like that's like one of my all-time favorite Metroid moments.
I mean, yeah, like, I feel like I could talk a lot about like all these different moments of Super Metroid. Just to keep it concise, I have a couple more rooms I want to shout out, but I'll make it quick, I promise. We can't talk about Brinstar without talking about the big pink room. And I don't know what its official name is, but you get the charge beam there. It's the room that has Spore Spawn connected to it. It has a great... it has like a bunch of different... Like it's a power bomb door in there. It has a super missile door. You could do like a really cool like wall jump to get an early missile that the game intends for you to use. The grapple beam to get. I always feel like it's a really, really... like important room and kind of a centralizing figure for this Brinstar area. And it's certainly the largest room that is connected there. But I also want to give a shout out to it's right on the edge of Red Brinstar, and it connects, or it's right beside Meridia. And actually you can get to this sequence from Meridia, but it's a one-way trip. And it's just like a really like gross looking Red Brinstar room where like you have all the Venus fly traps or whatever they are that are like on the ground pulsating and gonna swallow you, and you could actually like drop through one of these to get to a power bomb expansion, and a little bit lower there's a couple other power bomb expansions and some missiles. Like, that whole sequence I think is just like really cool because it feels like just sticky and wet and just kind of nasty when you're there. It always really stuck out to me, and I loved, and as we'll talk about later in the show, the music that accompanied it. I felt it was like really one of the most atmospheric portions of Super Metroid to me.
If we're gonna talk about the Venus flytrap flowers, we gotta talk about the Spazer beam, not the wide beam, the Spazer beam.
Yes.
Gosh darn it. Yeah, so this is actually something you're not supposed to get until you get the high jump, but of course, if you know how to wall jump, you can get it early, and you definitely want to get it early because it dramatically increases your firepower and it makes you look very cool doing it. I actually didn't discover this until like my second or third playthrough of Super Metroid. Unfortunately, I didn't. There was another beam sequence break that I did discover in my first playthrough, but that will have to be for a future mapping Metroid. But yeah, always love getting the Spazer beam in this area, and yeah, it is the Spazer beam, not the wide beam.
I hated the wide beam. I don't know why they called it that. All right, well, let's move away from specific rooms. We'll talk about like kind of the lore as it is for what we have discovered in Brinstar. And I guess like I say as it is because like obviously you don't have kind of the same lore implications that you do in the Metroid Prime games, but even in like a lot of other 2D games, you kind of like, obviously Chozodia is a setting where the Chozo once lived. You kind of have your spots in like Metroid Dread, for example. Dachoras is the big furnace of the planet, and et cetera, et cetera. Whereas I think like Brinstar just kind of presents itself as just like a really big area. Like I don't know that there are necessarily a lot of different lore implications, but you certainly, like lore aside, like this is where you certainly meet series mainstays like the Etecoons and the Dachoras, as we talked about. You see her first glass tube shattering, like we talked about. The Mockball, which is now infamous in the Super Metroid community. Like there are a lot of like really important events and things that occur here, but from a general like Super Metroid like pushing the narrative forward storytelling, I don't really think there is that much going on in Brinstar. Like we don't really know a whole lot about it. But I don't necessarily think that it's worse off for that.
No, I think like it doesn't have like direct ties to the story going on, but also I don't think it needs to. Super Metroid is a very effective story, but also like a very simple story at its core. There's
Mm-hmm.
not a lot of moving pieces going on, which isn't a bad thing. Like Super Metroid's story is phenomenal. It's perfect. I zero notes on that. So I also don't think Brinstar needs to have like all this intense lore and heavy implications. And it does have enough interesting things that just kind of lets you use your imagination. One of the things that I'm actually surprised we haven't brought up, especially because we were talking about Kraid, is the dead soldier right outside of his or maybe it wasn't a soldier, who knows? But
Mm-hmm.
this dead figure that looks like it's wearing a power suit of some kind that's just kind of rotting, with like these bugs, kind of eating away at its corpse, just outside of Kraid's lair, and that's something that like has never been addressed. We don't know any of the history behind who that person is, and I think it's kind of better off because of that we get to use our imaginations to kind of tell our own stories about what that person's story was.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was gonna say him for a second, but let's just talk about this dude. Like, I think it's like kind of cool in like a meta sense, like how like so this is obviously, and in some spots Brinstar is a very almost like one-to-one in terms of room design remake of some of the rooms that you see in Nestroid, but like there are a lot of other things that are put into this area that are just like really kind of curious. And I always thought of maybe appropriately Alien when I thought of this dude who is just like dead outside. It reminded me of the space jockey from Alien, which is of course an alien in a not a xenomorph, but just like an alien life form that was found on LV-426 and kind of looked almost like an elephant. And for many decades, people were speculating about like what this thing was, where it could have came from, and of course, like we know that the prequel movies Prometheus and Covenant kind of give us an explanation for the space jockeys, but at the time, like it was like an enduring kind of mystery, and I've always kind of felt the same way about the little dude in Brinstar who knows how this person met their fate. I think like I'm not really ever in favor of remakes, but like that could be something interesting to explore if those Super Metroid remakes end up being true. But I also kind of think I agree with you. Like it's almost better off just like not knowing. So I think that's really cool, and I think it's just like cool in the meta sense as well. And we'll talk a little bit about enemies here and mix it in. But like, what's up with the mini-Kraid? Like, was the Kraid we knew from Nestroid, was that a mini-Kraid and now this is the real Kraid that's over there? I've always found that question really, really fascinating to kind of ponder as we think about like what is going on in these Brinstar depths.
Yeah, because technically, if you think about it, Nestroid also has a fake Kraid. Granted, it's just a palette swap. It's the exact same Kraid model and the exact same height. But I always, I guess for me, I always just consider Kraid more so a species than like a character. And so that's just kind of how I interpret it. But like, who knows?
There's no right, there's no wrong. It's just
Yeah.
it's interesting to think about. So yeah, I think like in terms of like lore, less is more. I think for Brinstar, because I don't think that it needs to over explain anything. There's parts of it that are kind of a lush, if hostile, jungle. There are parts of it that are a poisonous swamp almost. There are parts that are cold, dark rock, and there are parts that are, God, whatever's going on in Kraid's lair. So yeah, it's very interesting for me to kind of think about like all of the different things that go on here. So let's talk about some of the enemies that you find here, and I feel like it's like kind of fun because like this is a really, again, like in terms of enemies, it's like the kind of the remake of Brinstar from Nestroid. So you get to see more detailed versions of a lot of the classic Metroid enemies that Nestroid introduced. So you get like your Rios, your Rippers, and Rippers play a huge role here. We left out the infamous Ice Ripper room where you fall down in or in Red Brinstar as a great room, but like yeah, you've got your side hoppers here, your screes. And, you know, we've talked about it a few times, but I really love the sucker plant, which I guess is actually known as the Samus Eater, which is a great name for this enemy. Just absolutely classic. And I want to specifically shout out one of the most notorious enemies, I feel like, in this area. And that, Doom, is the Yapping Maw. This thing, like, there's no worse feeling, I feel like, at least in Brinstar. Maybe there's worse enemies in the game, but, like, if you get caught by this thing, it takes you so long to get out of its grasp. And this sucker, like, extends kind of far. And for anybody that doesn't know what we're talking about, it's the worm with like claws at the end of it. It's typically in the water. It actually typically lives in the sucker plant as well and will suck you down. And in water in Brinstar as well, which is really great. So yeah, these things I wanted to make sure that we mentioned. But I mean, like, man, you're talking about like just some of the classic Metroid enemies here. Like, you're talking about the Key Hunter, you're talking about the Rio, like all of these great enemies that you get to see the Waver kind of like reinterpreted and in 16-bit. So while not necessarily the most like unique set of enemies, it is really cool to see all of these enemies kind of like come back and get a little bit of a glow up, I feel like, in 16-bit.
Yeah. The Rios and the Side Hoppers in particular really stood out to me in Green Brinstar during my first playthrough, because for those who don't know, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, but in terms of my Metroid playthrough, so my first game was technically Metroid 2, but I didn't play too much of it, and then I played Metroid Prime, then I played Zero Mission. That was like my first 2D Metroid game, and my first Metroid game that I ever beat. Not including Metroid 2. But yeah, Zero Mission was the first 2D Metroid that I beat. And so that was kind of my introduction to the Rios and the Side Hoppers. And then fast forward, about 3 years later, when I played Super Metroid, right before Prime 3 came out, and I re-encounter these enemies again. And one, I was surprised how similar the sprites look to Zero Mission, and I kind of realized, like, oh wow, Zero Mission's kind of artistic direction was kind of like a one-to-one recreation of like what the Super Metroid version was. But the big thing that really like took me back was how much faster and aggressive they are in Super Metroid. In Zero Mission, they kind of take their time. They kind of, the Rios kind of hover towards you. The Side Hoppers will like do a couple of animations before they hop. No, in Super Metroid, they come after you. They come charging. They are ready to fight, and that always like really stuck out to me the first time I played Super Metroid. It's just how aggressive they are, and I absolutely love that more aggressive take on those creatures. Definitely. Green Brinstar, it's the quote unquote safe area, but it's also not safe. It's still like, it still goes out of its way to show you like, hey, don't get too comfortable. Like you still need to show up here. And so I always love, those are probably my two favorite interpretations of those enemies is Super Metroid.
I want to shout out a quote unquote enemy, but like one I think is really unsettling, and that's the eye. That like when you start the game, this thing turns on and like you can hear like that whatever that it makes. It's really ominous and really creepy, especially when you're in like dark Brinstar at the beginning of the game, because like I always have got the feeling like, okay, this thing's like a security camera broadcasting my literal every movement to Mother Brain, who is now going to alert the entire planet that I'm here. I think is kind of the implication of that eye, and I think it's used to like great effect. And it's worth mentioning too, I was watching a video maybe like a year ago about like a player who somehow, some way, like did not set off the eye. He did something to get around the eye, so we never actually like saw him, which I thought was really cool. And I don't think it changed anything, but I just thought that was really interesting. But I really like that piece of like environmental storytelling for this creepy thing that's just on the wall. It's like a gross security camera almost.
When you brought up eye, at first I thought you were talking about the eye doors before you fight a major boss, and I was like, Yeah, those are kind of cool. Not what I would pick, but then when I realized what you were getting into, it's like, oh no, that's a phenomenal pick, actually. Yes, that is, yeah, and I would argue that's like a quintessential piece to Super Metroid's intro. Without those cameras, I feel like you're losing like a huge piece of that dynamic. The sense of like, in spite of how familiar this is some place where I'm not supposed to be right now, and it like such a perfect lead up to the introduction of the space pirates.
All right, well, from enemies to bosses, we go here, Doom. Let's talk about a couple of the big ones in Super Metroid here. And before we get to the Big Daddy, let's talk about Spore Spawn, who I think is like... So, I mean, this isn't your first boss of the game, but it's still a fairly early boss. It's an intro boss, let's just say. I think that... like for what Spore Spawn is, I actually like really like this boss, which is a shame because I usually skip it. But I think, and we'll talk about it later, but like the music I think is like really spectacular as we kind of get into this boss. But like even I just kind of like the way that the boss itself moves. It kind of teaches you like you got to be quick with your morph ball, with your missiles. Which is not always easy to do when you have to press so many more buttons to get to the right missile in Super Metroid rather than just holding a button. And so I kind of like this boss, actually. It's nothing fancy, but like it's just a fun little boss that you go and do. And I think like for the point in the game that you're at, like I think it's like definitely a step up in difficulty from Chorizo, for sure. Obviously, it ramps up greatly with some of the bosses that we'll talk about, or that we won't talk about in this episode, but that are in Super Metroid. But I've always been a fan of Spore Spawn, and I'm a little bit disappointed that we've never seen another version of this boss kind of come back, because playing a few ROM hacks, there's been some really creative Spore Spawn boss fights.
Yeah, we've seen Spore Spawn's music come back in a couple forms in Zero Mission, but we haven't actually seen like kind of a reinterpretation of that exact same fight. And I'm in agreement with you. Like I love its little head bombing animation, especially as it starts to speed up. There's something about that I just always love seeing. Yeah. And yeah, I love that original theme that Minako Hamano did as well. Just like really utilizing like these higher register keys on this kind of virtual piano. Like it sounds so creepy, but like, yeah, I absolutely love it. And also like I think a really perfect boss at the point in the game that you're in. Like it definitely it steps up the challenge, but it doesn't like hammer you with like this huge difficulty spike either. It just basically shows you like, hey, you know what? You're gonna have to dodge a little bit more things now, but also you can also shoot it and get some health back, and you kind of have to make a choice. Do I want more health and ammo, or do I want to take this thing out a little bit faster? And so I think it's a really good boss at that point in the game, and you freaking get super missiles after that. Like I think this is like one of the earliest games that you get super missiles in.
I love that Super Metroid just like gets right to the point as well, and gives you like super missiles and critically actually power bombs, because when you get power bomb expansion in this game, they actually like mean something, which is kind of nice. But let's talk about Kraid. Speaking of super missiles here, like Kraid the Spectacle is fantastic. This big, hulking, ginormous, I don't even know what this guy is, a lizard, a dinosaur, Godzilla, who knows. But I love how he just like kind of comes up and rises and takes up the whole screen. That is absolutely fantastic. I think the difficulty on the Kraid fight could be, a little underwhelming. I think even for people at this point in the game, like if they're if you're just playing Super Metroid for the first time, I think Kraid's probably a little bit easy. What do you feel about that, actually, before I say any more? Is Kraid the appropriate difficulty, or is that just my Super Metroid talking?
I think it might be a little bit of our bias. I think it depends on what kind of player is playing Super Metroid, because Metroid is not super platforming intensive, but this boss fight definitely does challenge your platforming abilities a bit more. And so I think for people who are playing a Metroid game who maybe aren't as well skilled or well versed in platformers are going to have a much harder time, because you're on a very narrow set of platforms and you're dodging a lot of obstacles. Again, for people like us who play a lot of platformers and we're adjusted to that, not going to be a huge challenge for us. But I do know some folks who've tried Metroidvanias, and some Metroidvanias are more platform intensive than others, and then they go to Super Metroid, and then suddenly that Kraid fight, pun not intended, is a big spike up. But yeah, so for me personally, I'm in agreement with you, but I can also see how for other people that could be like definitely a big power scaling thing.
Yeah, and like, I mean, it certainly doesn't detract from the spectacle is what you want from this boss battle. So like that it's easy is kind of like, whatever. But I will say, like, this boss battle, I feel like kind of takes on a new life once you get to a certain level in Super Metroid, because like now when I face this boss battle, it's really exciting actually, because I'm going for the Kraid quick kill, which is a series of 3 super missile shots that you got to fire in really unique succession, and even a regular missile shot in order to even open up Kraid's mouth to do that sequence. And I'm still not that great at it. Like I think if I had 10 tries to do it, I'm probably doing it once or twice. That's about it. It's hard like to get the timing down. So it does kind of actually like have a second life once you become really, not even like really good at Super Metroid, but like once you play it enough times to know that this quick kill option exists. And I kind of like that Kraid is now like they almost like replicated that in Metroid Dread, albeit with just like a little bit of a different way to do the quick kill. But yeah, like I really actually love that about Kraid, in that there's just like new layers to this boss when you get to go there.
Yep, and then of course as a reward you get the incredible Super Metroid Various suit, which always a fan of that Super Metroid design for the Various suit.
One of the best looking Various suits I think in the series. Just the striking orange just looks like absolutely fantastic. You know what I actually like really love about the Kraid quick kill as well is like when you do it, you can run as Samus like off screen to the Various suit room and actually get it, and it's really weird. But you could do it, so there you go.
Interesting.
Yeah, like it's really like kind of like awkward, because sometimes I'm like, oh, is my game doing okay here? Like, am I? Is this just about to crash? Anyways, but yeah, I really like that about the Kraid boss fight as well.
Question for you: what's your do you prefer the green visor on the Various suit in the sprite work, or do you prefer the blue visor in the artwork?
Definitely the green visor.
Same.
Yeah. I'm kind of a sucker for anything green. I think it's my favorite color, okay? But I also think like the green, like it just like pops a little bit more and really contrasts with the red. Not that blue doesn't, but I think that green just like kind of looks a little bit more slick.
I agree.
Yeah, so not a ton of bosses in here. We just have the 2, but I think that the 2 that are here, I mean, particularly Kraid is just like such a great legacy boss that like how can you not love that? And of course, Doom, we let's talk about it now. Let's go a little bit out of order. Let's talk about the music that goes into this boss battle, which is one of the reasons that it elevates it, and one of the reasons that Brinstar, I feel like as a whole, is like so fantastic, because I honestly think there are no less than 3 top tier musical tracks in the Metroid franchise, and arguably maybe even more. So let's start with Kraid. I'm not going to say I think Kraid is a top tier theme, but like there is certainly something when the screen is shaking, when Kraid is rising, and you hear that bwomp 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 bwomp, like that's good stuff. I love it. It's a classic, just kind of like beat 'em up monster theme that I really love.
Yeah, I especially like the accents in the lower registers that really just like kind of really hone in on like the weight and the size of Kraid as well. The dun 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 dun. Like I feel like that's really that to me is like the secret sauce that just makes that thing work so well with Kraid. Which is funny because I also don't think it works quite as great with a Fantoon, even though I think that's an even better boss fight. Yeah, I think it's really perfect specifically with Kraid in particular. But yeah, overall like a really sick track. But definitely when we're thinking of like the top three track, I know at least two right off the bat. I'm curious to see what your other pick is for what you're talking about.
Well, for a top tier track, I am going to include the Spore Spawn boss battle theme. I think it's
Okay.
really creepy, really good. Like it's simple, but there's I think, and maybe like it's the Spore Spawn sound effects that go with it, like the blah, like that kind of whatever. But like I think like just the like the do, like I really think that works for Metroid when you have kind of that creepy ominous boss battle music. Like they don't all need to be pulsating like rip your hair off your chest kind of battle themes. I think this one like really works, and we've heard it kind of here and there before or afterwards, excuse me, particularly in Zero Mission. I don't think that this has come back post Zero Mission, right?
I think Zero Mission's the only game it's returned in.
Yeah, which is a shame because like I feel like this would be a really good boss battle that could have fit like I think this would have been like a great theme to reimagine for like a Dragaiga boss battle, which is like not that dissimilar from Spore Spawn, or like, you know what I mean, like something along those lines. Like I really am quite a fan of this boss battle, and it's like an underrated cut, and I wouldn't even say it's like one of the top, like I guess, tracks of Super Metroid, just because Super Metroid is so stacked with awesome music. But like I do think it's a really top tier track, and like one that probably should get talked about a little bit more, but doesn't, just because of all of the other great musical tracks. I mean, even in its own area.
Okay, I think I agree that when you mentioned top tier, I thought you were about to say like this is one of the best tracks in the game, and I was going to be like, I don't know about that, but it's a really great track. I won't argue against that, and it sounds like that's more kind of what you're arguing for. So yeah, I really like the Spore Spawn theme, absolutely. But there's definitely 2 stars of the show at Brinstar.
Well, let's talk about the first one. Let's talk about Green
Right.
Brinstar. An amazing track, which like honestly is like insane that this has not become like a Metroid remix staple. That like every few
Right.
games gets a different interpretation. We've really only seen the multiplayer like remix in Metroid Prime 2, which nobody played. So like half the people, including myself at one point, probably even forgot that it was there. Like this one is like such a great track, and it's got energy. It's got a little bit of like, I don't know, like those instruments you'd expect when like you hear a jungle theme or something like that, like the kind of the heavy drums. I think this theme is like so great that it really is shocking that it hasn't come back. And like one of the like the first time I ever played AM2R, I think like a lot of us, that was what struck me, was hearing this remade in the Hydro Station so beautifully that I was just like, wow, this is really spectacularly done. Why have we not heard any new renditions of this song? So yeah, certainly Green Brinstar. I would say Green Brinstar is one of the top tracks of Super Metroid.
Absolutely. On one hand, I agree with you. It's like, yeah, how has this theme not become a staple? Like this is, I feel like if you talk to most Metroid fans, this is like probably for Metroid fans like a pretty iconic piece of music, and yet it really has only appeared as, you know, that multiplayer arrangement in Prime 2, which most people probably recognize that from Smash Brothers more than Prime 2, funny enough. But at the same time, one of our biggest complaints with some of the more modern 2D games is, oh my god, stop reusing Red Brinstar, do something else. And so I'm also kind of glad that Green Brinstar also hasn't suffered the same fate, but I do want it to appear at least once in a future game. It would be really nice. Aside from Prime 2 multiplayer. But yeah, this piece of music is so cool. I especially love the way that like it just suddenly fades in. You just start with the snare just going, and then you hear the melody start to kick in and fade into, and then as you mentioned, you have these kind of like these almost wood style drums that like that add even more that add more percussion. They kind of act like a tom would on a drum kit, but it has this very thick wood kind of sounding hit to it that just really makes it feel like a part of the environment, which again, that's like one of my favorite things about Metroid music is kind of how it ties environmental as, you know, the surrounding environment and characters into its instrumentation. And yeah, it does this. It creates like all these really unique and intricate melodies. Yeah, and I think it also helps that like it's not like a 1 minute looping track. It's, you know, I want to say it's like a minute and a half to 2 minutes, and so it doesn't feel like it's, you know, hammering on you. It doesn't get stale at all. It, you know, has a lot of diverse elements to it that, you know, makes it really fun to just keep on loop as you're exploring. And so I think this is just an absolute tremendous piece of music right here.
And like I don't know what you call it, like I'm gonna call it the chorus of the song here, but like the do 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 do. I love that, man. Like that part is so great. Is that
what you're talking about?
Yeah. Just like the portion that do 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 do. Like I just think it's so great. But we have to talk about what I would still say is my favorite piece of music from the Metroid series. I really do think that. And you know what? I'm going to say, I think that we're all a little bit fatigued of this song, but like you cannot deny what an absolute atmospheric banger Red Brinstar is. It is like the perfect Metroid song in so many ways. It is moody, atmospheric, threatening, melodic. It's like the perfect, I think, soundtrack to that portion of the game, which feels very hostile, and it feels very just like alien or like uncomforting. I think that Red Brinstar or Lower Brinstar is like such a fantastic theme. Like sometimes on the Zelda cast we talk about, okay, if the main Legend of Zelda theme had to be replaced, what would you replace it with? Like what other piece of music could you see as like the piece of music? And I think like, I don't know, the Metroid doesn't necessarily have like an iconic like main theme as Zelda does, but like I think like, you know, if you had to go and like really say like this is one of the main themes of Metroid that could be like the main theme, I think this would be like a good replacement for maybe like the Brinstar theme or the title screen theme or whatever. Like this one is like so great in so many ways.
I would say I'm more fatigued of like the later renditions of Red Brinstar. I am certainly not fatigued of the OG Red Brinstar. This is an absolutely phenomenal piece of music. And again, like I really love the percussion again, which is obviously very different from Green Brinstar, which has, you know, again, these very thick, hard hitting kind of like wood style drums. Here it's like very like, it almost feels like it's played on like brushes, and I know I'm saying played on, I know that it's all like digital music, but like just kind of the way I'm interpreting the way, you know, the way the timbre kind of feels, it almost feels like it's the percussion is played on brushes, not quite on a hi-hat, but just played very softly. And I love the kind of, you know, sandpaper kind of like I think it just adds like this really cool kind of like tonal piece that almost feels like, you know, it almost feels like the life in Red Brinstar isn't as taming as it is in the jungle. You know, we're at a place where there's a little bit less activity going on, and maybe like things echo a bit more against these hard walls, that whereas the foliage in the jungle is going to absorb that sound a lot more. It really does create the sense, you know, this bigger sense of isolation as a result. It's again, it's such a wonderful piece of music and how it interprets that.
I want to also like quickly shout out, I guess like a lack of music actually, but I think like the lack of music when you go down to Dark Brinstar at the beginning of the game is like really powerful. And like there's like sort of like a little ambiance there, but like not much. I think this is like really cool and just like kind of sets the stage for, because like you start Nestroid and it's like you get the Torian theme, you get the Brinstar theme right away. It's very bombastic and it kind of just like loops for a while, whereas this one really does a good job of like kind of setting the the atmosphere of Super Metroid. So I think addition by subtraction here is what I wanted to shout out.
I 100% agree with you, and actually, really the that retro Brinstar theme. It's just the Crateria theme, but without the rainfall and the weather in the background. But again, I think it's really emphasized well in that area, especially just by those bits of silence. Stay there for a few seconds, and then you just hear a little, and it just let you sit with it. It really just emphasized those drones, and it just lets you sit in it and marinate in it. So I 100% agree with you there. Yeah.
Which is a really good add-on to the eye that we talked about earlier, because it's so quiet. You really hear like little noise that it makes all the more. Are there any musical tracks in Brinstar that we skipped over? Did we nail them all? I think that's everything, right?
I think that's. I mean, technically we. No, because Red Brinstar plays in the Meridia section as well. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. Yeah.
Good save room music as well. Let's just say.
Oh yeah. Great save room music across the game. Absolutely. And a great item room theme as.
Yeah, that's what I meant actually. The item room. I'm sorry, that's what I meant. You know what? I will say actually, like playing a lot of Nestroid and playing a lot of Super Metroid, I do actually appreciate the glow up that theme got from 8-bit to 16-bit. I think it does sound pretty good, and I was happy to see it back. All right, let's talk about some of the items that you get in Brinstar, and then we'll talk about some of the expansions. I think the expansions here are so awesome, but like let's take a look at the items. I'm looking at the map here, and like you have got the charge beam, you've got the spazer beam, you've got the X-ray scope, you've got the morph ball, of course, and you've got the Varisuit, as we've talked about. Like there is a ton of critical upgrades that you can get here, as well as your first reserve tank, which is, I guess you can get these in any order, but most people playing, I'm going to assume, are going to get their first reserve tank here. So really important pieces to your journey that you pick up along the way in Brinstar as well.
Yeah, I feel like I could be wrong, but I feel like Super Metroid is one of the few games that has that can contain like several items in like a single room. I know Fusion kind of does it with a couple of rooms too, but like when I think of Super Metroid items, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Is like this is one of those games where it's like, oh, you found a room with an item, and then there's usually like a secret path that will take you to another item, and then that room will have another secret path that will take you to another item. And Brinstar has like a few of those that always are super memorable to me.
I'm really glad you brought that up, actually. So let's talk about expansions. Super Metroid is the only Metroid game that does this. There's no other Metroid game that does this. Because like even in Metroid Fusion, by the time that game came around, you had your grid-based map system, and there was only one expansion per, let's call it, per box on your map, and it would be marked with a circle. And you know, if you saw the circle, you're like, okay, I need to go back and I need to get the item there, wherever it may be. But it did not allow for two items to be on the same box, because then, you know, it couldn't be a circle or it couldn't be a dot. Whereas Super Metroid, and Brinstar in particular, has a couple of rooms where this happens, where there are two and sometimes almost three expansions in the same room. Talking about the reserve tank, actually, so immediately after the Mockball room, you can go to the Chozo statue and you can get a reserve tank, and you're like, aha, great. But then you can roll right under that tank, and you can go and see a missile expansion just sitting there for the taking. I believe it's just sitting there for the taking. And you're like, okay, wicked, this is awesome. And then if you want to go even further, you're just like, well, okay, I'm going to go and bomb in this room. And there is another missile expansion. And this is like a perfect like idea, because like who would think to look in the room where they just grabbed a missile expansion for another missile expansion? I love that Super Metroid does this. I think that it's just like so clever. Yeah, and there's another spot in here as well where that happens, where you go in and there is again kind of just like a room with two missiles that are just, now granted these ones are kind of just like sitting there for the taking. It's right above where you get, or just kind of right in between the elevator from from criteria to let's see, where is this room? I wish they had room names here, by God. But it's right in between the elevator, in between the middle criteria and far right criteria. And I just think it's like a really, really neat idea to hide multiple like expansions in the same room, because like, who's looking, you know?
Right. Yeah, and again, something that like again you've kind of see that in future Metroid games, but not to the same extent that Super does. Especially like you mentioned, once they introduce the circle and dot thing, maybe we'll see that again in Metroid 6, since that handles item kind of placement, and you know the map design is a little bit differently from Dread moving forward, because that is something that I would definitely love to see come back. It's just kind of like, you know, I do like it when games like kind of troll you a little bit, and I do appreciate like Super Metroid kind of like pulling your leg and be like, this sucker would never try something this, it would be too obvious, and then you try it and it happens. Like I absolutely adore stuff like that.
And yeah, like I don't know how they would do that, because like presumably the map would be flashing like it was in Dread. And so, like, I don't know, maybe, like, you could probably have, like, expansions right beside each other, but then would the map stay flashing? I don't really know.
Right, yeah.
You already pointed out the, one of the great energy tank acquisitions in this game, but I think it is worth another mention here. My God, the same fake blocks that got you in Ridley's Lair get you here in Green Brinstar as well. But the payoff is that much sweeter, because if you jump over the gap and you get the energy tank, and even if you don't, presumably you've learned a new skill, which is to wall jump, and you can come back, and it's a short little loop. You could get a power bomb, you can get the energy tank, and you can get a super missile right behind it as well. So I think that's a really nice sequence to go and do. You know, we talked about the super missile expansion in the Mockball room, but like that's really like a key expansion in this game that really kind of unlocks your ability to sequence break in here. So I think that one is worth mentioning as well. And I am a fan of the energy tank that you get after you defeat Kraid, and you have to go and you have to fight a bunch of B-Toms, which are those like little bug enemies that kind of grab you like a Metroid would and suck away your energy. And the energy tank is actually hidden in this small little room on the way to Kraid, and after you beat him, the room is unlocked. You go in, you shoot the wall, you get your tank, everything is all good. And yeah, I'm a fan of that particular energy tank, and actually because I just love getting energy tanks, I do have to shout out, which is a retread of a Metroid NES-troid energy tank, but the one that is in Dark Brinstar, basically right by the opening salvo where you get your morph ball, just a couple of rooms over. That particular energy tank is hidden up into the ceiling. Typically, you will need your high jump to go and get that. So, nice to see some homage paid to the OG Nestroid there as well.
I do also want to shout out another expansion near the infamous energy tank, where you learn how to wall jump, and you need to actually be good at wall jumping. But once you reach the top, you can either go left and escape, or you can go right and enter and morph just as you're hitting the apex of your jump to get into another area. And I can't remember if this is a missile expansion or a power bomb expansion. It's one of those, but power bomb expansion. Thank you. Yeah. I'm okay at Super Metroid wall jumping. I would not consider myself good at Super Metroid wall jumping by any means. And this one always sticks out to me just because of how much of a challenge it is for me to get right. But when I do get it right, it feels very good.
There's another like really cool expansion just like that, right before the noob bridge. It's like when you're in that one room when you're kind of going from Green Brinstar to Red Brinstar, and there's all the gates that are coming down and all the flies are coming at you, and you're just like, I just want to run. You can jump up and morph mid-air and get go through one of those green Mario pipes and hit a missile expansion there too. And And I do want to shout out another really cool energy tank that I can't believe I almost forgot, because I always this is inevitably, I think, like always my last one that I get. But right after you get the charge beam, you could actually like power bomb that Chozo statue, and once you do so, you're like, oh great, I'm going down. I've got an expansion coming. But no, in fact, you need your gravity suit in order to speed boost and hit some blocks out of the way to get your final energy tank, which is like really kind of hidden in this submerged hallway below the charge beam statue as well. So I always I don't know why, but I've always kind of liked that one. It feels like very tucked away, out of the way, like a secret, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a little different than what we were talking about, where it's like the item is hidden in the same room where you just got the item. Like,
Yeah.
it technically is, but it's one that you're not going to come back until the end of the game, and that's typically not something you do. It's like, oh, I'm going to revisit the room where I collected the item. The only other game that I can really think of at the top of my head that does something like that is Metroid Prime hides one of the Chozo artifacts. I wouldn't also, yeah, in the charge beam room, funny enough.
Yeah.
Where you have to go underneath the water and use your gravity suit to access the room. Or you know what? Maybe that's a missile expansion I'm thinking of.
It might, but there is an artifact, and you do have to go back to a room and Magmore Caverns, like right at the very top.
That is, well,
Right? I think you got a power bomb. Whatever, it doesn't matter.
No. It's the opposite. So you go into the room to collect the artifact, and then you come back later and power bomb it, and then get a power bomb expansion.
Oh,
I think that's what you're talking about.
You're totally right. You're totally right.
But no, I was getting two rooms in Metroid Prime confused. I was thinking of the Wave Buster room. That's the one where you have to come back and get the artifact. But the other one, the charge beam room, that one you actually do have to come back later to get a missile expansion with your gravity suit. So that's the example that I'm going to stick with.
Well, there you go. I feel like between all of the items, between all of kind of the secret expansions, I think it's like really satisfying, those rooms that have like multiple expansions in the same room. There's like, it is hard to go too far in Brinstar without encountering something worth your while. You know, I just like it like we didn't even talk necessarily about like the rooms that you don't get anything, but like you learn how to shine spark, you learn how to wall jump. I have always loved to kind of try and challenge myself to freeze the rippers and like jump right to the top before you get a lot of items, which is really, really insanely hard to do for me. Anyways, it might be easy for some of you guys out there, but I just like, when I think of this area, I think it's like a really, really great area. It's kind of like a nice beginner area, but it's got a lot of layers to it. It's got a lot of different parts to it, so it constantly feels new and interesting and fresh. And I mean, honestly, it's just one of my favorite Metroid areas, for maybe some of the reasons that we've talked about here. Maybe because it was one of my first big Metroid areas that I really got into, and maybe it's because of the great music that you just are constantly spoiled with throughout. But I would put this one high, and did put this one high on my list of favorite Metroid areas of all time. So I have a lot of love for Super Metroid's Brinstar. I think it's just an exceptional area.
I think, and this is something that I think most Metroid fans would agree with, but I think getting lost is very important in a Metroid game. But I think even more than that, getting lost in the correct way is important in a Metroid game. If you get lost and you're kind of just left without any idea of like what to do or how to progress, like that's not fun. Nobody enjoys that. I feel like Green Brinstar, though, is like, again, the exemplary gold standard of, how to get lost in a Metroid game. Because as you just mentioned, every time you turn around a corner, there's always something to do. There's always something new to see, even in the rooms that you're revisiting. And I think that's what makes getting lost in this area alone just like so much fun, because, hey, I have no idea if I'm going the right way, but I know that I'm cracking something here and that I'm at least progressing towards something. Even if it's not towards my main objective, I'm going to discover something new. I'm probably going to, get more powerful in some form. I'm going to discover something new. And all I'd have to do is keep moving forward or left or right or up or down, etc. No matter what I do, I'm gonna find something. And and eventually I'll probably find the right way. But if I don't do it immediately, that's okay because I'll find something else instead. And Green Brinstar, I think, like, is one of the best Metroid areas, if not the best, in achieving just that.
What's your favorite of the Brinstar sub areas? If I have to put you on the spot, green, red, dark, Kraid.
Probably Green Brinstar. I could definitely go with Red Brinstar if on another day though. But yeah, right now I'm definitely feeling Green Brinstar. But like, again, you're asking me to pick my favorite child right now. So
I know. You know what? I'm for years I would have said Red Brinstar, but I think I just like the music better. I do think Green Brinstar is my favorite of the areas itself. So I do agree with you. But ask me tomorrow, it could be totally different. It could be Big Daddy Kraid, you know, for all that we know. And whatever is going on in that biome with the mini-Kraids and the soldiers and all of that stuff. And the yapping maws as well, we can't forget. All right, Doom, any final thoughts on Brinstar before we jam out of here?
No, not really. I think we've pretty much covered all this area. I kind of summarized my thoughts kind of in my last piece. So yeah, Brinstar, one heck of an area.
Play Super Metroid, please.
Yes.
Okay, everybody. Well, thank you so much for checking us out. We are doing new episodes every single Wednesday. So go and like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Tell your friends about the Omega Metroid podcast. If you got a Metroid fan in your life, tell them where they can get their weekly Metroid fix. Leave us a review. That would be super awesome. We would really appreciate it. And be sure to check us out over on YouTube as well, on the Omega Metroid YouTube page, if you want to check these podcast episodes out in full video glory. You can see our smiling faces. Plus, we have a lot of walkthroughs for Metroid games. There are video walkthroughs that will tell you exactly where to go, and a lot of other content and highlights there as well. And OmegaMetroid.com. That's our home base. That is where you can see all of the information that I referenced for today's podcast, including maps, walkthroughs, expansions. We have the latest news. We have the latest thought pieces. We have the latest guides. Everything that you could possibly want if you are a Metroid fan lives over on OmegaMetroid.com. And as we did mention earlier, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/SPNet. That will give you a whole plethora of Metroid content, including the great Metroid area ranking, which we referenced a couple times here. Yes, we ranked every single Metroid area, and there was about 80 or so, and it was a great experience. And spoiler, this one is high on the great Metroid area ranking, so go and check that out. And lastly, give us a follow over on Blue Sky at Spiteri316 at Cross at Omega Metroid. That is going to do it for us, my friends. Until next week, everybody, take care.